track mites other than an alcohol wash, but I do feel like it's the most reliable. Also, if you don't want to do it right there on top of the hive, you could just have multiple jars, collect the bees, label the jar, and take it home and do it in the shade at the end of the day. Not a problem. I think that sugar rolls are less reliable, I guess is what I'm saying. And I'm a really big proponent of keeping records. So I think everyone should have a data book or whatever where you track each colony. Because, for example, if you have a colony that's over threshold like 4 times, that's probably not the one you want to split and breed from or make queens from in the future. You want the one that like held its own and only needed the fall treatment, right? So you need data. Your mind is not going to remember. Okay, write it down. And then every colony has a name or a number so that you're tracking it. You also, for the IPM approach where you're rotating chemicals, you want to know who got which treatment and what the next one should be so that you can make sure to rotate. I don't know how you feel about the 1% threshold, but there is a really great document. This is by the Honeybee Health Coalition, where they kind of map it out very, very precisely based on the phase of the colony and really season, although it doesn't say season, but of course, population increase or decrease. Of course, you know when those are. And they make other recommendations that are a little bit less aggressive than the 1%. But I had really good success using that threshold. So you can take it for what it is. I recommend that beekeepers start to try some cultural and mechanical control methods, not just relying on, chemicals. I use drone brood removal. Maybe you would prefer to have a screen bottom board. It's very passive and doing its work without any efforts from you. I think they can help. They cannot stand alone and control mites 100%, but they can, stall the mite reproduction enough to maybe you don't have to treat as many times, and that will save you money and it'll save the bees some chemical inputs. And as I said before, I do not feel that synthetics are necessary. I think that you can very well control your mites without using apivar if you have oxalic acid, formic acid, and thymol in your back pocket. That should be enough to get you through and keep your mite levels low. I already talked about this, but just to think about other control methods, you could have a brood break, which you can do on purpose, or you can let your colony swarm, especially if you're going to catch that swarm, and that will be your natural split. And you should look into the bees that you're buying. Are they the best bees? Are they the most mite-resistant bees? What kind of track record do they have? Or have they been treated with apivar twice a year for 3 years before you purchased them? Anyway. Okay, so if you think about this management system, it is an organic system because all of the inputs are allowed in the National Organic Program. It uses integrated pest management, which is a really good approach. And however, you cannot label your honey as certified organic. You could write up a little pamphlet about your methods, though, and let the customer know that, I don't use any synthetics that are allowed, just so you know, without putting down the other beekeepers that do, but you could say, I don't, right? Okay, so I'm just going to finish up with a big thank yous. So you can see here the people on my stakeholder list. So these are the people that contributed to figuring out these management systems that we tried. And then there were lots and lots of volunteers that came out, still come out and help me to manage the bees. And with that, I will take questions.
Priscilla, this was a wonderful presentation. Anecdotally, we've been having tremendous winter losses around here. Any insight on what you can attribute that to?
I feel like I need to get into studying winter losses more because I feel like I never know what to say. People are adamant that they had their mites under control and plenty early in the year and gave them enough food, and yet they still die. I've been hearing lots of reports of major winter losses, and a lot of them sound like CCD, which of course is another one of those things that is a mystery. Uh, I guess I don't know. I would like to solve that problem.
I wonder if you need folks to collect samples of their dead bees for necropsies at your lab.
I guess I don't know what I would be looking for. Also, for things like looking at viruses, really, if they thawed out ever, they can't be used. So that's kind of a problem. Um, I'll ask around though about in the future, if people are checking on their bees more often, and you've like maybe next winter, if you find a pile of dead bees in January, that might be worth sampling. But at this point, it's been 60 a couple days, so they're kind of ruined. Like when I collect samples for that, I put them in dry ice within 1 minute of collection, because DNA is really fragile.
Hmm.
Thank
Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you.
I think the answer is like multifactorial, so it makes it very difficult. We have two questions here in the chat. One is, have you ever studied thermal treatment?
I have not studied it. No, I have been hearing a lot about it lately. So for those of you that don't know, there is a system where you can heat up the hive and try to kill mites, because mites will die at a lower temperature than bees. Um, I would have to read up on it to comment on how I feel about it. Um,
The other
so no, I
chat
haven't.
question is from Ann Grawley of what can be done for small hive beetles? Is there any treatment for that?
Um, Generally, strong colonies should be able to fight them off. I know that's a really lame answer. Uh, I think trapping them would be great. There's multiple different types of traps available. I also, you know, I'm not a big fan of synthetic chemicals, as you can tell. So I wouldn't really drench the soil with that guard star stuff, but you could try the nematodes that can control, because the beetles, the larvae leave the hive and go into the soil and pupate there. So there is an option there to kill them outside of the hive. I have to honestly tell you, so I am just finishing up a feeding study where we fed colonies last fall with either they kept their honey, sucrose syrup, high fructose corn syrup, or pro sweet invert syrup. And we had to collect bees like last month. So I was going in there, way before anybody goes into their hives. And there were adult beetles like in every cluster.
Mm.
So they're here for the winter, honestly. And so that's a cautionary tale for if you're putting pollen patties on, because you could just go ahead and start the beetle reproduction in your pollen patty, right? So don't just throw it in and leave. I would go back and check and see, because if you have little larvae crawling all over it, just take it out. It's not worth it to me.
Good to know. Because Ann did say that she had a big problem with small hive beetles last year. So yeah,
Huh.
it's
I
gonna
mean,
be
there is a chemical control for that. So checkmite, which is coumaphos, which people used to use for varroa mites, you can sandwich it between corrugated cardboard and keep your bees away from it, and the beetles will crawl in there and get at it and die. I wouldn't recommend it as part of this management system though, because then you can't say you're not using synthetics. But if you're a conventional beekeeper, you can totally do that. So look up the label for Checkmite Plus, and you'll see it'll describe how to do that.
Jim Foster from Mill Creek is asking, if you're breaking down the hives for winter in August, how do you allow for honey production during the goldenrod and knotweed and ester in September, as far as combs available? Basically, do you put supers back on for a fall harvest or not?
I have not been doing that. You could, if you used formic acid as your treatment, you could go back in 2 weeks or so and put supers on. If you use guard though. It's a 6-week treatment, and by the time it's over, I feel like that fall flow is over. And you're right, I would have certainly had higher honey production if I could have collected fall honey, but mostly I let the bees just pack it into their brood nest.
Good answer. Anyone else out there? Well, Robyn, I could say that was very, very informative. You did a great job. You're a great presenter. The slides were excellent. I think the big takeaway for me was when I think about organic, I'm thinking like no preventative type chemicals. But I think the key thing is that we're talking about organic, natural chemicals versus synthetic, and that's the differentiation. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Real good.
I had a question on the drone comb. It's been around for a long time, but is there maybe a proportion of how many combs per box or per colony? Would more be better?
I think I used about 10%. So 1 frame out of 10 for each brood box. I wouldn't do more because then they're putting a lot of resources into that, into making those drones, and then you're just taking it away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly don't know how effective it was. Like if you remember the lines for varroa mites, conventional versus organic, that was like with and without drone brood, and they were pretty similar. So I don't really have data on whether it was particularly useful.
Well, I appreciate that. That was a very good presentation. So this is also available through the webinar, through Penn State's webinar. They can go back and review this information. We'll get a site for that. Maybe Robyn, you can put it in the chat if there's a link to that. I think you did earlier.
Yeah. So just for your information, I also am working on a physical printable version of it that kind of outlines everything. I'm like in the process of creating that.
Oh, that'd be great. So somebody could download it on a PDF maybe. And
yeah, and take it with you to the bee yard or something. So yeah, that's in the works.